Hello, music listeners, underground enthusiasts, and re-nyehis mia tua servir ut miat at kot ut nawine. It's been a minute since the last entry in this series, and you know what? We're just going to forget that it happened. We're going to have a nice fresh start. I've got a lot of songs to talk about for you to sort of make up for lost time. You know, by the end of this video, you'll forget that I was ever gone. Let's get into it. Coming up first, we have NAVYXOWER with Skirt featuring Swaine, and it's a pretty dark and smooth R&B track that Navy and Swaine both really have time and room to shine on. Navy's vocals on this are some of my favorite that I've heard, and the fast-paced singing and sort of strained notes have this super and impactful mix over this lush trap beat with a pretty wavy ambience that supports some twinkly keys and some pretty haunting vocal chops, even if the vocals are mixed a bit too loud sometimes. The writing is pretty good, balancing emotional vulnerability with confidence. Navy does a pretty great job of hitting a lot of the different pressure points that are needed to be hit in a song like this, in a style like this, and it's also a pretty great verse from Swaine, delivering an equally smooth verse with some pretty clever bars and a performance that leans much more into the mood and theatrics of the depicted emotions. I really love the delivery on this. The track sets a nice mood and vibe. I'm really impressed by both artists here. I like it a lot. SadBoyProlific has dropped Alone Part 2, and this is definitely a super conversational and ballady track, with SadBoyProlific steadily releasing bars over a sleepy guitar and a dusty snare. The vocal sample is okay as a melody on the beat. I appreciate that it is about as minimal as the rest of the production. The mix is a pretty clean and dry environment for some poignant and vulnerable bars about isolation and the sort of feeling that SadBoyProlific might not be receiving the validation and flowers that he feels he deserves. It's well written and doubles as a sort of introspection on maturity and relationships, as well as in a reflection outwards with commentary on the environment around him. It's short and sweet. He gets a lot out in two fairly succinct verses. I enjoy how it's structured, and the delivery is really what sells this. Mitsu has dropped I'm Tired of Your Lies featuring Kuru, and the mix on this track is pretty damp and compressed, and as a result it creates a bit of an overbearing environment, and that actually works really well. The production rumbles underneath these glossy high-tone vocals. It's a cool sound where the production resembles some spacey echoes and foggy ambience rather than more rhythmic melodies. I like the verses a lot too. Both artists do a good job of matching the eerie atmosphere of the track with some dejected songwriting about reaching this sort of like fizzled out end of a relationship. The sound design is definitely what shines, and Mitsu and Kuru both give some pretty good performances. Bedhead has dropped Neon Green with a little Wet Wet. This is a pretty fun and bubbly dance track with a lot of attention to detail put into the production and the engineering side of things. The sliding synth melodies working in tandem with these bouncy sort of call and response beeps are very sweet and lavish. They surround the entire track, but they never really feel overwhelming or distracting from the other moving parts here. Both Bedhead and Lil Wet Wet give some pretty entertaining performances. I think that the structure of the track really gives Bedhead a lot of space to deliver some seamless and lengthy verses with very compelling songwriting, and Lil Wet Wet absolutely kills these melodies with such a clean mix that cuts through the sort of rest of the softness in this beat really well. This is definitely a highlight for both artists. Sinxi's got Fear out, and the guitar on this track is pretty slick, and the clarity and the tone of the instruments is a good balance for the contrastingly roomy and soft mix of Sinxi's vocals. The mix on the track is pretty interesting, with the panning and pitch sliding up and down the track, this sort of like change in cadence throughout, and at some point, blending the vocals into the bassier sections of the instrumental to pretty near incoherency. It's not a technique that I hear super often. The recent wave of this sound typically enhances the vocal clarity in super impactful sections like this for that super stark contrast, that really big separation of instrumental and vocal, but Sinxi taking the opposite route kind of results in this pretty interesting sound that does get better with each listen. I'm liking it more and more, and with the interesting sound design of the production, it boosts a very pretty and tender performance that technically is a good display of range and is syrupy sweet at its peaks. It's essentially emo with a bit of pop and electronic influence. I like it a lot. casperrr released Watch Me, and this is a bit of a ghostly folk track with some splashes of emo worked into the mix. The layers of the vocals work really well on this, these haunting vocalizations floating in the background as lush main vocals blend smoothly without losing much of their impact. The writing is heartfelt and it tackles a pretty wide array of topics, but at its core is vulnerable and tactful in its progression. I love the wispy guitar melodies. I do not love the hi-hats. I get that the simple, steady hi-hat for indie folk is kind of a bit of a trademark for the sound, but on this track specifically, I think it kind of distracts from how pretty everything else is. Overall, a pretty haunting track from casperrr, and I'd like to hear more. BLOODMONEYLUNA dropped flameboy&wetwilly. I was pretty happy to see a new Luna track, especially after hearing the Atlas feature on the Anti-Det anthem from Sativa. This song is a bit of a short burst of sparkly and explosive energy fueled by these buzzing synth chords and entertaining bars. Loch Ness, my bitch curvy, I need Topsy, but she turvy. It's a playful track that leans heavily into its quirks, and as a result, it's infectiously catchy and fun. These flows over these blindingly bright rage beats are something that I probably won't get bored of from Luna. Nico North has got Drown It Out. Nico's kind of keeping the 2016 dream of cloud rap alive in the best way with this track, subscribing to the same relaxed and hazy philosophies that his contemporaries did in that era, and that powered the initial boom of the genre. The tired and occasionally slurred delivery over this booming bass and under the stuttering hi-hats, all tied together by the super echoey guitar loop, is pretty much everything that I want from this sound, and Nico sells it with a genuine love for the style. Scoob's got Spend the Night with Friday and Familypet. It's a heavy, moody, and demanding synthwave track that Scoob, Friday, and Familypet all sell really, really well. It's a track where you can tell that everyone has had fun. The processed and filter vocals cut straight through the pounding tempo of the instrumental. It's a little post-punk, it's a little gothic, and the gloominess of it is a nice switch up from Scoob's insistent shine that is typically on their tracks. I love the synth melodies, I love the super heavy percussion. Sometimes I think that the writing gets away from the delivery a little bit, but I also understand that vocal clarity and dryness is not exactly the goal here. But otherwise, I love the vocal mixes, and all three artists have very impassioned and emotional performances that all are really cohesive together and work and bounce off of each other really well. I love this track. Myth Valley and Jauntsen teamed up on Inevitable. I've really been enjoying the recent sounds and tracks that I have been hearing from Myth Valley, and this song is definitely not an exception. The punchy and thrashy intro with the very urgent vocal delivery kicks the song off with so much energy, and it quickly switches to a much more organized sound with a pretty great hook from Myth. The commitment to the vocal tone and the intensity sells the track and is one of my favorite performances that I've heard from her. The production on this is absolutely crazy as well, blending thrashy and oppressive punk rock, a slightly nu metal breakdown towards the end, and some pretty wild sound design. And Jauntsen matches the chaotic and disjointed energy of the track really well, fitting into the ever-changing structure of the song with some characteristically great vocals that give the song a bit of a pop flair. I'm kinda obsessed with this track. I'm kind of obsessed. Ending the list off, we have Dex with Crack in the Wall, and after sort of constantly spilling this adulation for Dex and his scarily clean mixes, hearing a buzzing, bit-crushed mix on his vocals is pretty surprising, and wow, I love it so much. The vocals sound pretty pristine over the trancey trap production, and the ambience leaves a lot of room for Dex to croon and softly get some great writing in. The display of range is also pretty fun as well, with this nice energetic peak happening towards the end. The writing is heartbreaking and relatable. The crowd vocals at the end are massively roomy, echoing far into the background as well. It's a lot of really cool sound design choices, some great mixing styles, some great writing. This is probably my favorite Dex song in quite a while. And that's going to do it for this week's weekly tracks list. Thank you so much for watching. I have some cool interviews with some very cool artists coming up, a couple video essay ideas, and some couple reviews headed your way as well. So be sure to pay attention and you know, be patient for those because they're coming out soon. Catch me in the next video where the intro bit of the next video is whatever the top comment is of this one. Some restrictions may apply. Don't say weird shit. Bye.